Welcome to week 11. It is Growing Your Fall Vegetable Crop, and I am presenting this week. And I am located in Canyon County in Caldwell at the University of Idaho Extension office in that location. We are super excited to have you here today as we kind of talk about ways to create templates to grow our fall vegetable crop and to think about what are some of those potential crops that we can grow as we move into that fall season in our series. But before we get started this afternoon with our You and I Together series, just a little bit about the University of Idaho Extension. Our main goal is to bring knowledge and research of the university to you. So it might be where you live, maybe where you're working if you're joining us, potentially listening at work or working with individual youth at your site. So super excited that you are here today with us. Do note that the University of Idaho Extension has office building locations in 42 of our 44 counties across Idaho, but we do serve all 44 counties as well. So some of our offices are serving more than one county. Today we're going to highlight a little bit about one of our areas for the University of Idaho Extension, and that's going to be our area on water. So we're just going to quickly watch this 45-second video to get us a little bit more information on water and what we're doing at the University of Idaho with that regard. So with that, here's that video.
University of Idaho Extension is working to ensure a safe and stable supply of water for all Idahoans. From water quality monitoring to watershed ecosystems, irrigation water management and hydrology, UI Extension is helping to protect our water for the future.
So just one little part about the University of Idaho Extension and the items that we are working on, this being water in this case. Those of you who have joined us for previous classes probably know that we've had others for family and consumer sciences. We've got 4-H youth development, a lot of different options that are happening and unique interest for the University of Idaho Extension that we share out with individuals across the state. So as we go into my educator highlight for today, I'll just introduce myself a little bit and give a little background. We had the piece about water, which certainly ties in a little bit to my role in urban horticulture and working with individuals on their landscapes, their gardens, and so forth, so that you can grow a nice bed of garlic like we have in this top right picture, or be able to spot some of those squash bug eggs that you see in the second picture down there. Or perhaps you had a really wet spring, which we didn't experience this year, and ended up with some peach leaf curl on your peach or nectarine tree, perhaps, that you see here. Another item that I work with in my role here as an extension educator in Canyon County is the Idaho Master Gardener Program. And so I work to facilitate our volunteers here in the county. And in this picture here, you can see some of those individuals who are out doing an integrated pest management walk so that we can alert individuals in our community on what insects, diseases are showing up, or what we need to do in our gardens to be better prepared for the upcoming time. And then kind of my last piece I'll highlight on today is my role of working in navigating junior master gardener programs to share those within schools or community outreach locations, or to work with some of my master gardener volunteers in delivering those junior master gardener programs. So if you haven't been able to combine and check in with one of us on this junior master gardener piece and you have youth at home who are interested, certainly keep an eye out and follow our University of Idaho Extension in Canyon County or our University of Idaho Extension Canyon County Master Gardeners. We will have some more offerings of those Junior Master Gardener programs as well in the upcoming year. So super excited to have those. So I hope that as you prepared for class today, you were able to identify some of the supplies that you needed if you want to follow along or practice as we go within that realm. We have our garden planting chart, which we will be referencing today. Any particular seeds that you wanted, we listed a few there that might work for you. You can see those here in this picture. Definitely our lettuce crops will work. Definitely, I think the leaf lettuce would maybe be a little more successful at this time than some of that head lettuce. We've got some radish, beets, we've got turnips and so forth. So we'll talk about some other potential seeds that you could be planting in your fall garden. A couple other things would be a paper towel, or perhaps you have napkins. Napkins will also work really well. We can discuss that as we go through and stop sharing here in just a bit. And then your glue. So when you are using glue, you want to make sure that's a non-toxic glue. And so as you, maybe look at that bottle, generally these are the school glue components, and those work really well. If you don't want to use glue or don't have glue at home and available, you can take some flour and water and mix that up so it's a consistency kind of glue-like, and that will become your glue base versus using glue. So that's another method that we can use as well. So that just created a little bit of extra prep to make that, and thought that the glue would be just as well today. So with that, I'm going to stop share at this point, and we're going to kind of roll through here just to kind of see what we have in terms of creating some of our uh, garden charts. So with that, as we think about this particular task today, I'm going to ask you to unmute or to use the chat, so whatever you feel comfortable with doing here, and go ahead and I want to know, I've got this piece of paper towel that I have with me today, and this paper towel is 1 foot by 1 foot. I want to know, how many plants do you think I could grow in this space? So if this was a garden, 1 square foot garden plot that I have, how many plants can I put in that garden location? So how many do you think we could grow? And I see we've got some in the chat there that are popping in. We've got 12 and 20 and maybe one, perhaps a possible typo there that they thought. So one of the things that was maybe not fair on my end to ask you was just how many plants. I didn't describe what type of plant could we grow in that particular 1 square foot space. So I'm going to make it a little more specific on this second one, and you're welcome to place those into the chat or to unmute and share those out. Even those adults who are on and want to join in and participate with us, you're welcome to unmute as well. But we're going to say that we're going to grow lettuce. So one of the crops that I mentioned that we could grow would be lettuce. So how many lettuce plants do you think you can have in this 1 square foot space? So how many lettuce plants do you think you can grow in this 1 square foot space? And I see we've got some options there in the chat that are coming up. So anywhere from 1 to 12, we have someone in the middle at 6. We'll see if we have any other potential options there. Perfect. Well, actually, if we think about this 1 square foot of space, we can grow 4 lettuce plants in that particular 1 square foot. And some of us are probably thinking, what? I can place 4 lettuce plants in that 1 square foot location? You certainly can. And sometimes we refer to this as square foot gardening as well. So you may have heard that term in the past. I just kind of use it as this like little garden plot that we can use and then create this scale inside with these pieces of paper towel before we place them out in our garden. So we can actually identify, how do we want those items to be set up? Where do I want my lettuce? Where might I want my broccoli? If we were doing something like tomatoes, we could make one for a tomato as well, although those take up a little bit more space than we have in that 1 square foot area. So in order to use this kind of planting piece as we go through, we have to kind of think about how many plants can I fit in that area, right? So I said I can get 4 lettuce plants in a 1 square foot. And what we're going to use these paper towels for are essentially to place our seeds. So that we're going to place seeds on there, and then we're going to move that into that garden space. But if I have one sheet here, and if I go ahead and fold that sheet in half, I've got how many squares now if I were to think about this particular single piece of paper towel? So how many squares might be in there? You're welcome to unmute. You're welcome to put those in the chat. But how many squares now do we have if I fold that in half? We do. We've got 2. So if I wanted to get to 4 squares, so if I wanted to use this to plant my lettuce crop, I've got to get to 4 squares. I'll go ahead and fold that in half again, and that's going to get me 4 squares. So if I take that 4 square piece that I have right now. And if I fold that in half again, I'm going to be doubling that. So we're doing a little bit of math here along the way, kind of incorporating that as well. But if I were to take this square and only do that fourth and then add one more fold to that, I've got 8. And if I take that and fold that in half again, I've got 16 squares. So that's kind of a quick little rundown in terms of what that will look like as we break those out. So I did create some ahead of time just so you would get an idea of what that might look like. So I've added a little bit of marker on those, so hopefully you're able to see those lines. Let's say this is that one that we had that we folded first, right? We made our first fold and then we did one more fold, so there's 2 folds. This gets us those 4 squares. So as you start to look at what does that look like, these will be your 4 squares that we have for those lettuce plants. So essentially in the center of each of those squares is going to be where we're going to have that lettuce seed that we're going to add to our piece of paper towel. So that's our 4 square. Our 8 is going to look like this. So hopefully you're able to kind of see some of those blue lines on there. But we've now got our 8 squares that are in this particular 1 square foot piece of paper towel. And then to finish up, we've got our 16 squares. So definitely as we can start to see what space is required for some of our plants, some of our individual plants that we can grow in the fall, such as our radish, will be on this 16 squares. So we can see that we can definitely get a lot of radish in 1 square foot, or for lettuce plants, or if we're looking at something that's 8, maybe we're choosing to grow some sugar snap peas. And so we could put 8 in that particular 1 square foot. So just some kind of fun things to think about in terms of that square foot gardening. Now I'm going to throw a little bit of a, a curve at you, and I want to create, that was pretty easy, right? Because it was like 2, 4, then we had 8, and then 16. But I need 9 squares for one of the plants that we're going to be working with today. So can anyone out there think about a way that I can use my 1 square foot of paper but get 9 squares? And I see in the chat someone's maybe mentioned that we're going to have to use thirds. So thank you, Katie, for sharing that out. We do need to use thirds. So I've got my piece of paper towel here, and I'm going to fold that into thirds. So hopefully you can kind of see that green line on there. So I've gone about a third, kind of like I'm making a fold for a letter that I'm going to send in the mail and put in an envelope. So I've got my third. I'm going to fold that that bottom, I'm going to fold up. And so hopefully you can see my blue line there. So now I've got 3 squares in there. And again, if I want to take these 3 areas and want to make, I need 9, I've got to create that thirds again. So I'm going to fold this over in thirds. And so hopefully you can see where that green line is, where it folds over. And then my final one will fold over as well. And so now I've got 9. So just kind of a little information to think about in terms of how do I get 9, and sometimes it throws us off, but it's always great to kind of think about how can you fold and make these shapes. So great to see that we have some individuals out there who can help us through this process and get to that thirds using that 9 aspect. So we will use that here in just a bit as we go through. So I appreciate you helping out with that. If you are out there and you are, folding your piece of paper, one of the things that I maybe didn't add on the list is to have a pencil or a marker, because one of the things that's helpful as you create these squares, sometimes we forget what seeds did I put onto that piece of paper or paper towel. And so being able to label those. So today I've got my name up here because I don't want anyone else to claim my piece of paper towel later on. If I'm working with my siblings or something, I mean, we were pretty competitive as a younger individual. So want to make sure I'm using my own paper towel and seeds. And then on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and add what vegetable am I planting. In this case, I'm going to plant spinach. So that's going to be one of my examples today for that spinach. So how do I determine how much fits onto one particular piece of paper towel? That's where I'm going to reference you back to the garden planting chart. So this chart right here is the chart that we had in the handouts folder, so week 11, and hopefully you were able to pull that. And if you have that in front of you, you'll be able to mark with that pencil or marker that you have some of the plants that I'm going to suggest to you that will be great for fall planting. So the first one that's on the list that will come up is going to be beets. So you can put a star, a check mark, circle that. Beets would be one that you can certainly use in the fall. The next one down that I would recommend is going to be carrots. So carrots are a really nice one to plant in the fall. Beyond that, we have lettuce and the mustard greens, which are right below it. So those are both really nice to plant in the fall. You can get some nice fresh lettuce as we move through. And then the next item down is going to be a radish. So your radishes, your spinach right under that one. And then the next two are together as well, which is going to be the sugar snap peas and the Swiss chard. And some of us are probably like, Swiss chard, no thanks. But you can always give it a try. You might find a delicious recipe. In fact, I could share a good recipe with you if you send me an email on Swiss chard. That's really fun and exciting to work with when youth. And then the last one I would recommend is turnips. So that's at the very bottom of the page. So those are the ones I think you would find really good success in using this activity. There's another one that's a potential option, which would be cabbage. Although sometimes cabbage can be a little bit difficult to start from seed out in the garden in the fall, and sometimes it's better to start indoors and then transplant those outside. So that would be another one you could potentially put on your list of potential options to look at. So with that, we have that chart. The next piece I need to know is how many plants can I put on my paper towel, and how do I know if I have 16 or 4 or 8 or 9? So as you're looking at that chart there and you follow that across, you're going to be in the fourth column. So you've got the crop, you've got the recommended planting date, which we'll talk about that here just shortly. And then you've got the number of days till emerging, but then you have your number of seeds per plant. And so, or per paper towel, sorry. As you look at that paper towel list, that row and that column there, sorry, it's a column, not a row, you'll find that those beets are 9, carrots are 16, and I'm going to be doing spinach today because I think I want to grow some nice, lovely green spinach to harvest. Maybe a little Popeye infused spinach will help me bulk up a little bit as I go into those winter months. So I'm going to be using spinach, and that's going to be 9 down there at the bottom. So I'm going to have 9 squares on my particular chart. Now we know where to find our folds. How many squares do I need to make on that piece of paper? When do I need to plant them? So it's oftentimes, pretty easy to plant in the spring. There's always the spring schedules and planting guides, but when we get to the fall, it's a little more difficult because they're hard to find. And no one really says specifically, what day do I need to start those particular seeds. So on the back of your seed packet, you have the um, information that talks about your planting depth, what you need to thin to, but thankfully this is going to help us in that thinning piece and we won't have to thin. And then our days to maturity is the one that we're going to look at. And in this case, it's 48 days. So this spinach that I have chosen is going to take 48 days to become mature to when I can harvest that particular spinach. So in the fall though, because of our amount of sunlight that we have, we've got to add about 30% extra time for that to grow. So if I do some quick math on that, that's about 14, 15 days off of that 48. So about 2 extra weeks that we're going to need. So instead of 48 days, I now have 62 or 63 days. So I'm just going to make that real quick easy for us and say we've got 60 days, so 2 months, let's say, to look at that. That means that if I want to plant this spinach and I know my last or my fall frost date, my first fall frost date for the Treasure Valley is about, and this would be for Canyon and Ada County, is about October 15th. But if you don't know your fall frost date, certainly reach out to Extension and you can ask someone and we'll be happy to help you get that date. But let's say it's October 15th for me and I want to make sure and have some crop ready before that frost comes. knowing I could also put a cover over that as well if I want to extend that a little bit. But I need to plant by August 15th then. So I'm going to have these prepped and ready to go and be able to put those in my garden space here on the 15th, or, maybe today after class, I'll take these home and put them in my garden and get a little jump start. So that's how we create and identify our timeline. So figure out where we're at, use that last date, go back in time, or essentially, right? So where we're at today, and get those planted. So hopefully that helps you as you choose what product you're going to plant in your fall garden and landscape. And then the last thing I wanted to note on that card was how long it takes to emerge. So the number of days to emerging. So that's going to let you know how long will it be before you start to see a little seed sprout that's going to pop out of the soil. So generally for most of our plants that are on there, we're in about the 5 to 10 day range. Some are a little quicker, some take a little bit longer, but you've got about that 5 to 10, and most of these will start to pop through that soil and be able to use that. So back to my spinach, I'm ready. I've got my 9 squares. So if you created your 9 squares at home, or you created those squares for your particular plants, you've got those set up. I didn't mark these, so they might be a little difficult to see those 9, and I apologize for that. But you're gonna add a dab of glue, okay? So many of your teachers probably say 1 dot does a lot, and that'll work for us too as well today. So we've got 1 dot on that particular uh, piece of paper towel. And I'm going to recommend that you put 2 seeds in that square. So anytime that you're planting these vegetables, I would go ahead and do 2 seeds. If you get both of them to germinate, we're going to go ahead and have to thin one of those out or pull one of those out. Go ahead and pull the weakest or the smallest plant. And then that way you don't have a blank space. So most of us will probably have at least 50% germination. So that's why I'm suggesting you put 2 seeds there. So I take my 2 little seeds, I'm gonna put them on that glue. I'm gonna continue that process all the way across on all 9 of those. And we'll be able to have those all finished off. So kind of get that up close there. You can see those 2 seeds, and they'll start to dry on that paper. So just as a few other items just to look at, this would be one for lettuce, right? So Joe Vandal's gonna plant some lettuce today, and those green X's are where those seeds and those dots would go. Here's one. Joe did some Swiss chard earlier today. So Swiss chard has the 4 squares, so you can see those seeds on that particular paper towel. And then I'll show one last one here. This is an example with the colors of carrots. So don't forget about those delicious carrots. Great for eyesight, I think. And then as you look at this, so this is the radish example with radish seeds on there. So hopefully that kind of inspires you to think about what you might want to do in your garden area as well. So the next piece, right, we've created this paper towel. We got to be able to plant it. We've got to put it out in our garden. So on the 15th of August, so here in 5 days, I'm going to go home. I'm going to take my spinach and I'm going to set that piece of paper towel on my garden location where I want to grow this spinach. Or in this case, I'm using radish of Joe Vandal right now. And so I'll have that set down there. And there are a couple of ways that you can decide to plant these in that garden space. One is to take a pencil, and so the blunt end, so an unsharpened pencil or a pencil, maybe it's missing that eraser on the top, or you still have that eraser. You can go ahead and moisten that paper towel just a touch, and then you'll be able to take that pencil and push those seeds down. And we're gonna push those seeds down to their planting depth. And if you reference back to that planting chart, you can find the planting depth as well. So it's that second to last column, and it might tell you like a 1/2 inch, or it might say a 1/4 inch. You can also find that information on the back of your seed packet, and it'll say planting depth as well. So in this case, if I was gonna do my spinach, I believe is about a 1/2 inch. I'll just check my seed packet, 1/2 inch. So I'm gonna push that down with the pencil so it's down about a 1/2 inch. I might even mark on my pencil what's a ½ inch? So I know as I'm pushing down and I hit that mark, I can stop when it hits the paper towel and I'll know that it's a ½ inch. The other item to do, so it could be a pencil, could be a pen, could be another rod you have at home, like maybe it's an 1/8 inch rod or 1/4 inch rod, that would work as well. The second option, if you don't want to use the pencil out in the gardenscape, is to cover that with soil to that depth. So in this case of my spinach, I would have my paper towel there and I would cover it with a ½ inch of soil on the top. And then I'm gonna go ahead and water lightly, right? Because we don't wanna blow away all of our seeds, especially if they're only down a 1/4 inch, but we're gonna add a light water on top of that. And then we're gonna keep that moist so that we get those seedlings that'll start to sprout. So
Yeah.
um, those are kind of a few couple items to look at. And then Joey, I see we've got a question.
Yes.
What's that
Alyssa
question?
asks, what are the benefits of using a pencil rather than just your fingers to push those seeds down?
Ah, yeah, so I think the benefit to using that pencil is that you could mark it so that you know how far you're pushing that down versus having to mark your finger. But your finger would work just as well. Sometimes I've worked with some youth and they're not particularly fond about getting their fingers terribly dirty out in the garden. So that generally changes in a bit of time, but sometimes individuals don't want to get their fingers dirty. So a nice way is to use that pencil or rod as well. So with that, that's kind of going to wrap us up for today in terms of, I'll take questions. So if you've got those questions, place those into the chat. I'm also going to have Joey place the survey into the chat today. I know we are nearing that 4:30 mark. And like Joey said, we like to really be respectful of your time today. So we'll get that survey into the chat. Definitely feel free to, and I do encourage you to fill out that survey, provide us with that information so that we can make this program better. You can also access that survey using your phone with this QR code. You can pull up your phone camera, hold that camera up on your screen, it'll pop up a link, or most phones will pop up that link, or a QR code reader app works as well. So Joey's gonna place that in the chat. If you don't get that out of the chat today, it'll be in the follow-up email as well. I believe we're at about 4:30. I'm gonna go ahead and stop my share and take any questions that anyone might have. And
We do have a question from Katie. Generally, what is a good time frame to start a fall garden?
yeah, so our fall gardens could actually be started right about now. So depending on what you're growing, so we know that that spinach example, as an example, was 48 days. And if I add that 30% onto that maturity, that puts me at about the 15th of August. So really, if you have something that's maturing in that 40 to 50 range, now is the time. If it takes a little bit longer, so beets would be an example, you could still get some beets, but they could take up to 70 days. So that does push us a little bit in terms of starting them right now. But if you were to use a row cover and cover that particular bed or space in your garden, you'd be able to extend some of that time. Or perhaps you have a little microclimate in your landscape and it's a little bit warmer, doesn't experience those frosts. Those would be areas to place those beets as well. So you could start potentially as early as July, like mid-July. I'm just kind of quickly trying to think on those maturity dates and then backing those up. But yeah, so about July. The hard part about starting in July for our area is the heat and keeping those seeds wet and moist so that they can germinate and those seedlings don't die on us. Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And I'll hang on for just a few more moments if someone needs to unmute and ask a question. Otherwise, great to have you on today. Thank you for joining us for the UNI together and this idea of fall vegetable planting and using that paper towel to create that visual aspect and being able to place that in the garden.